I think at least now he is truly happy, especially after the latest news that just came in right now that Bill Gates had to unload $1.8 billion worth of his stock because of the divorce that he's having right now. This, as of course, one of the other richest people in the world just sold off $2.5 billion in his stocks after also coincidentally getting into a divorce where he had to liquefy a lot of his assets. And as another person who's one of the richest people in the world started to invest in alternatives to the stock market. It says almost if the richest people in this world know that there's going to be some kind of stock market correction or financial calamity happening soon. Welcome back, beautiful and amazing human beings. This is Okradowski of WeAreChange.org. We're going to get into that topic, plus a lot more. We even have a very eye-opening and interesting interview with one of the co-founders of Nevada King in this video, where we're going to get into some of these larger economic consequences that are becoming too apparent to ignore right now with some really important information. That, plus all the latest news that's happening right now, as of course we do our best to try to inform you about what is actually happening in this world. And to answer the question that we began today's broadcast with, are the world's richest people liquidating their company's stocks at all-time highs? Some even going through divorces that are really for tax evasion and insider trading purposes? Is that happening right now? Well, truly, I'll just be honest with you, I don't know. There is some circumstantial information, but again, correlation does not prove causation, and it's a shame that we don't have real journalistic institutions in this country that could actually investigate these important matters fully, but sadly are protecting the current power structures at all costs. And they have the gall to call this journalism. It's not. It's stenography for the super rich, and that's why the very suspicious and secretive moves by the super rich won't really be fully acknowledged. And again, once you start seeing the mainstream media news as what rich people want you to think, everything starts to really make sense. The same super rich that are becoming more powerful by the day and exempt to the rule of law, which is becoming more and more restrictive for the average citizen, as we have this latest news coming out of Germany, where the head of the German police unit just called to ban any forms of protest that criticize the government's lockdown policies that have worked great for multinational corporations like Walmart and Amazon, meanwhile shutting down small businesses. Now, people's rights to peacefully protest and voice their concerns about this may soon go out the window in Germany, where the government literally set up camps in refugee centers for rule breakers for not following the decrees of local government when it comes to this exact same issue. Now, as citizens get punished for more and more trivial behavior, large multinational corporations still get away with absolute horrible crimes just by paying a small fine comparative to their profits. As today we found out that the Honeywell Corporation, that gets a lot of lucrative government contracts paid for by the tax dollars, was just fined just $13 million for sharing military secrets with China. In other news, the state of Texas announced that they are putting together proposals to get rid of, quote, woke philosophy, specifically dealing with critical race and gender theories from being taught in their classroom. The Texas Senate just also approved a bill that would allow people to constitutionally carry. All of this as, of course, more and more people keep flocking to the state of Florida. All of this as people have been flocking to the state of Texas, a state that is becoming less and less restrictive of its citizenry and representatively isn't bowing down to the, quote, new normal, which, by the way, we are going to be talking about extensively on LukeUncensored.com. There's a lot of important information that Tucker Carlson brought up that we've been talking about on Luke Uncensored for a very long time. There's a lot of things we're going to be discussing, all of that. Make sure to look for today's video in our email. Now, just jumping into the main subject of today's video, obviously, a lot of people have a lot of inflation concerns. We told you a couple weeks ago to keep a close eye on commodities. We told you that they were going to go up dramatically. They have. The price of lumber has absolutely skyrocketed. The U.S. trade deficit is hitting records. There are major supply shortages, and many factories and companies are finding it harder to get people to actually work. A lot of this signals some very troubling times, so that's why I'm very happy to have Colin Cadell, the co-founder of Nevada Kings, joining us today, where we're going to be discussing all of these important aspects in detail. This interview was done on behalf of Nevada King. We are working together officially for full disclosure. And as you know, I've been talking about alternatives to the dollars and precious metals for a very long time, and it's more important to discuss than ever, in my opinion. This is a win-win for me. You get to hear about a company who has its ear to the ground with information from inside of the business that you can't get anywhere else. So, Colin, I'm so happy to have you on. Before even getting into any of the introductions, a lot of things are happening financially right now. A lot of prices are rising for goods. There are supply shortages that are very significant. And just getting right into it, where do you stand on the larger inflation debate that's happening right now?
Luke, thanks for having me on your channel. The inflation is starting to run red hot, and we've been waiting for this as gold investors, which is what I am, for the past 5 or 6 years. So the fundamental picture that I've been looking at, which is monetary easing, the Fed being loose, and extreme amounts of money going into the system, and hence more dollars each being less valuable, is finally starting to rear its ugly head in the form of inflation. I'm sure you've heard the statistic going around that something like 25% of all dollars that have ever been created have been created in the last year. And as such, it's no surprise that we're seeing things like lumber, copper, palladium, copper, all these different commodities are starting to move. You're even seeing food prices starting to go up. And I'm sure we're going to talk about this a bit later. But, one thing that's been somewhat absent from that, it's been doing well, but hasn't been doing as well as some of us gold bugs would like, is gold itself and silver. But I think that is right around the corner, and we're kind of in a dream scenario. I hate to paint it like that because I think it's actually a bit of an ugly picture, but we're kind of in a dream scenario that I never would have imagined 5 years ago in terms of what the potential is here for gold prices in the coming 12, 24, 36 months.
Yeah, I mean, what did people expect? The government is printing more money. They want to print more money. They want to tax people, even though they print money out of thin air, and they have these $5 trillion bills that they're trying to pass through. It's absolutely insane, because we've been talking about this for a very long time. As you know, the longtime viewers of WeAreChange, we've been talking about inflation. We've been talking about the Federal Reserve. We've been talking about the spending that has been absolutely reckless. Just a few weeks ago, we were telling you, hey, commodities are going to go up. They have gone up dramatically. I have so many things I want to get into today, Colin. But in short, if people never heard of you, how would you introduce yourself? You're the founder of Nevada King. For people who don't know you, who are you?
Sure. I'm a junior resource investor, entrepreneur, company builder. And what that means in a nutshell is I'm really interested in finding the next big gold deposits. I run almost all my investments through a parent company called Palisades Gold Corp. It's private. I'm the majority shareholder. And Palisades Gold Corp has two major positions. One of them, which I know we're going to talk about a good bit today, is Nevada King. The other one is called Newfound Gold. Newfound Gold's been a spectacular success the last few months. It just reached a $1 billion U.S. market cap actually this week, and we're on to a huge discovery in Newfoundland. And my dream has always been to have something like that in Nevada, which is, of course, what I'm trying to do with Nevada King.
Yeah, Nevada's really interesting. I never knew it was one of the places where gold pretty much is one of the number one places in the world to mine for it. I never even knew that before doing this. And of course, a lot of people have been looking at precious metals, alternatives, cryptocurrencies, real estate to kind of move their money, as of course the central banks, practically what they're doing here is they're doing everything within their legal power and illegal power to just get rid of any regulations and just click zero on that printing machine. I mean, the effects of this are going to be absolutely insane. How do you see things kind of unfolding here with the Biden administration saying that they're going to be spending a lot more than the previous president that also, let's be honest here, spent a lot of money?
Yeah, no, let's be honest. That's right. Trump was loose on the fiscal policy, and now we've got Biden, who is taking it to a whole nother level. I think what you're seeing right now, humans are survivors and they don't necessarily realize the moves that they're making, what it means. So what I mean by that is people right now do not want to hold dollars. They're getting this helicopter money. Their asset prices in the form of stocks and equities since the COVID crash has been spectacular. So they're opening up their Robinhood account, their E-Trade account, and they're saying, wow, I'm a little richer today than I was yesterday. They're not converting that back into dollars. And any dollars that they have, they're trying to find other assets to throw the money at. So they're doing things like buying a second home. They're buying a home in the suburbs. They're going into new forms of interesting investments like cryptocurrency, which I'm very enthused about cryptocurrency, just to put that out there. But, they're putting money in crypto, and then they're putting money in these hot stocks, these Robinhood stocks that we've seen over the last year. And the reason people are doing this is because they know somehow instinctively, whether they recognize it or not, that the dollar is not the right place to be. And they're also looking around and saying, my goodness, everything else is going up in price. What's not quite happening yet, but I think, you're so tuned in, Luke, I'm sure you're seeing this. There's all these reports of consumer products that are going to start pushing prices up to reflect essentially what it costs them to make it. So anything from laundry detergent to food, and chicken prices are way up. And what's going to happen very soon is people are going to be looking on the one hand at that Robinhood account, and then they're going to be looking at their bill each week and saying, I have more dollars, but the dollars aren't really doing as much. And that's going to continue to grow. And at some point, there's just not enough more money to keep throwing in these things like the stock market. And we don't need a crash. Like, we absolutely do not need a crash like '08 to change what people are buying. All we need is it to slow down. We need a deceleration of that curve. And so that slows down enough and people's cost of living goes up enough that they say, what's the place to go now? And that's where they're going to go to where they've gone every time in the past, which is a protection, a kind of boring protection because it's not that volatile, but that is gold and silver. So I know that was a bit of a roundabout way to answer your question, but I think everything Biden's doing is going to accelerate. I think they're a little bit out of control. I think they kind of realize that. And the ramifications are going to start to be some even bigger distortions than we're seeing currently.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many things to really talk about. I remember just seeing an image just a few days ago showing how a man hid away his life savings, which was $50,000 a few decades ago. That money has been devalued so much comparatively to what it bought you just 50 years ago to what it buys you now. And a lot of people who are stuffing their money underneath the couch or trying to just have cash. I mean, it's smart to just have a little bit of cash on hand, of course, but the people who are just holding their money in the dollar system, all you have to do is look at the purchasing power of that dollar within the last few years even, and also just within the last few weeks, and you have a situation that doesn't really breed a lot of trust, especially with the Biden administration that's talking about raising taxes, raising capital gains. How do you see? Do you see the Biden administration facing the true reality of this larger kind of economic game that's being played on everyone, or do you think they're going to be continuing it to this absurd level because it's unsustainable? It's only a matter of time until people kind of face to the true reality of it. Do you think Biden will face that reality, or do you think it'll come later down the line and we'll still live in this fairy tale make-believe land?
I think at a certain point, the party has to come to an end. I can't predict exactly what that's going to look like. But what's happening already is we're seeing distortions in the market. And Janet Yellen and Jerome Powell are going to the media more and more often to try and control the narrative. I'm sure you saw a couple days ago, she made the remark, Janet Yellen, hey, we are maybe going to have to raise rates if things continue, if asset prices continue to spiral upwards. The next day, the stock sold off, and she comes back out and says, well, hold on a second. I didn't actually mean that. We don't think that that's going to be a problem. And so I think that they're very cognizant of all the distortions that are in place. They also smartly realize at this point that if they don't continue to pump a tremendous amount of money into the system, that what they've built right now is going to unwind. I'll give Biden a little bit of credit, as much as I hate it, that he's talking about raising taxes. I'm not a fan of taxes ever, but it's interesting that at least he's recognized if I'm going to create $6 trillion to pump in, maybe I should tell people that I have some way to pay for part of it instead of just creating a bunch more dollars. But with that being said, there's a lot of levers at play. There's the interest rates. If the interest rates continue to go up, then that means the cost to service the U.S. federal debt, which is somewhere around $25 trillion now, goes up substantially. And that eats into the government's ability to continue to pump money. So, there's just so many different levers going on right now. And at a certain point, what happens when one of those levers, like the interest rates, for example, shoots up to 3.5%? Historically, 4%'s been a rough average over the last 100 years, 4 or 5%. What if it goes back to that norm? Well, they can't service the debt anymore. So what does that mean? They're going to have to suppress the interest rates, and they're going to have to just pump more money. And so, you get this situation that it's going to go out of control. And what that means, and I know I watch your channel all the time, Luke. I know you've traveled to some places that are actually facing inflation. Like I've been to Argentina a few times. I think you went down to Venezuela at some point, which would be a much more obvious case. But in those economies, people will not hold their cash. They're smart enough to know, hey, I have enough to buy what I need this week, but that's it. And I'm going to spend it. And then when I need more, I'm going to figure out how to sell something to get it. And I'm not saying we're going to see that extreme in the United States, but the stability of the US dollar, it's already starting to come apart.
Yeah, I mean, having conversations with people in Venezuela that went through hardships, having conversations with people in Zimbabwe, seeing those Zimbabwean dollars, seeing the situation there, even currently, if you guys haven't seen the videos, definitely recommend WeAreChange Zimbabwe. You learn a lot of very important lessons just by understanding a little bit of current events and current history that are absolutely important to understand. And sadly, we don't get this information. So that's why I'm very happy to talk to you, Colin. And as an entrepreneur, as like a business owner, how do you operate? What's your business strategy during these insane times?
My answer on that's probably a bit skewed because my business is almost exclusively focused in the precious metals space. So, in theory, if things continue the way that they're going right now, precious metals and anything precious metals related could really be the one sector that shines while everything else is kind of in trouble. But more broadly, how are businesses going to operate right now? Well, first of all, Biden's talking about raising taxes. That's going to further harm businesses. We've seen COVID has caused a tremendous amount of these small businesses to close down and shutter. So, you're seeing more of a concentration of business being controlled by kind of these bigger companies and conglomerates, and all these things that we as Americans talk about as a backbone to a healthy American economy, like having the balance of Main Street and Wall Street and having a healthy small business sector. These things will just continue, in my opinion, to get worse and worse. More specifically on my side, we're seeing the beginnings of some strong interest coming in from all different kinds of investors. It was shocking to me last year to see the beginning of the silver squeeze movement, which was a millennium-led young people sort of movement of people saying, hey, silver does have value. This is something that we want to hold to protect our money and squeeze the banks and whatnot. You also have institutional money starting to come in strength back into the gold and silver mining sector. And we haven't seen that for the past 7 or 8 years. So, from my side, we're actually starting to see a renaissance and interest coming back into the space, which has been absent for the last decade. And there's no faster money made than when a gold bull market happens. I've seen it before, and it's a spectacular thing when it occurs.
Now, a lot of people are going to be asking why gold and not things like Bitcoin or cryptocurrencies. For me personally, it's like, why not both? I think it's important to look at other alternatives. I think it's important to do a lot of research and homework. But do you have an answer to that specific question? Because I know a lot of people are going to be asking it.
Yeah, I find it unfortunate that a lot of, I agree with your statement there entirely. I find it unfortunate a lot of Bitcoiners are anti-gold, and a lot of gold people are anti-Bitcoin. And I think that the narrative is of benefit to both sides, because gold has languished right now, while not just Bitcoin, but everything else has gone up. And so the gold bugs will say, hey, it's because of Bitcoin that gold's not going up. And then the Bitcoiners have a new technology that's only been around for 10 years. And what they want to say is, look, gold's a $10 trillion market. It's been around since before the stock market. It's been around since before anything. It's been around for 5,000 years. And in 10 years, we're going to remove it from being significant globally. And if they can perpetrate that narrative in a convincing way, then they've solidified a $10 trillion value to this new system that they're building. I think the truth lies somewhere in between or outside of that, in that Bitcoin is a very promising new platform, but it's trading like a new network. It's trading like something that's becoming adopted right now. And, all indications are, putting pullbacks aside, that Bitcoin seems to have gotten enough critical mass, and it seems to have enough promise that I think it's going to be a lasting fixture in global finance. And I think, with my libertarian and anarchist kind of leanings, that I love the concept. I think it's amazing. But let's not forget, gold's been around for 5,000 years. There's a lot of question how much gold is actually at Fort Knox, but the US dollar, which is the dominant currency, is the most dominant currency because it's got gold backing. They have more gold than any other central bank in the world. You look at the other major significant fiat currencies, and while they're fiat, they are backed in a sense by there being gold held by those central banks. And the currencies of the world that have no backing and no lasting are ones where the central banks don't hold any gold. So my point being that gold is understood not just by investors for millennia, but also by the central banks the last 100 years, that this is something that backs up the currency. It's something that always reacts in times of inflation when there's fear, and it's going to do the exact same thing this time, in my opinion. People are going to be pitching gold as hard as they're pitching Bitcoin when gold's at $5,000. It's just the way that things go. People get excited about what's hot right now, and they tend to try to downplay what's not hot and make the case that it's never going to be hot again.
Now, the company you co-founded, Nevada King, you guys have the fourth largest land package, correct me if I'm wrong, in Nevada. How did you guys get that, and what's the larger significance of that?
Sure. So Nevada, as you pointed out earlier in the conversation, is the largest gold producer in the United States as a state. In fact, if it were its own country, if Nevada were its own country, it would be the fifth largest producer in the world. The two large gold mining juggernauts that a lot of your listeners probably know the names, Newmont Mining and Barrick Gold, are both headquartered, based with a lot of their production in Nevada. And this is, if you're making a comparison to real estate, this is your New York or London of the gold real estate market. There's two major trends in Nevada. They're called the Battle Mountain trend and the Carlin trend. And when I say a trend, I mean an area that's about 100 miles long and a few miles wide, and where you get these areas of intense gold mineralization and where mega deposits form. These are elephant-sized deposits, so pits that you can see, holes in the ground you can see from satellite images. When you drive by these things, they're unbelievable. They're producing, just tremendous amounts of gold on an annual basis, and they're cash flow kings for these companies. So what started to happen, Luke, is back in 2011, gold was really, really hot, $1,800 an ounce. Barrick and Newmont began getting reckless. They started buying things at really high prices at what ended up being the height of the gold market. So that by 2013, 2014, they had gotten themselves into some really bad financial trouble. Gold prices by then had dropped down to about $1,200 an ounce. And what they did is they started paring back anything they could. They fired employees, they shut down mines, and they started to pare back on their prime exploration ground in the Battle Mountain trend. So in 2011, the whole trend was staked. That means companies had claims on it, and you could not go in and get new claims. By 2015, the narrative had totally shifted. nobody cared about gold anymore, and Barrick and Newmont were dropping prime exploration targets that it hadn't come free for the last 20 or 30 years. And so we had the foresight as a team to go ahead and raise enough money and go in and start grabbing these pieces of ground. It's pretty interesting. In the United States, you actually have to go with stakes. So think of like a 2x2 stake, and you have to pound them in the ground, and then you have to write your name on the side of the stake, and you have to do this in 4 positions for each claim, and then you have to go file that claim with the Bureau of Land Management, the federal government, and that's what gives you the right to whatever is found on that ground in the future, so long as you continue to pay rent essentially to the government. So we went about doing that. We picked up 8,200 claims. So that means we pounded something like 35,000 stakes into the ground over a 4-year period. And what the culmination of that has been is today we're now publicly traded. We've stopped staking ground because that opportunity is gone. If somebody came to you and said, Luke, I want to raise a couple $1 million from you, we're going to go pick up all the best ground in Nevada, you could laugh at them and say, Nevada King already did that, but that opportunity no longer exists, and it might not exist for another 20 years. Now we're starting to look at that ground, and we're saying, where do we go? Where do we drill to look for the next big gold discovery, so that our ground is not only interesting because we control quality ground, but it's further interesting because, hey, we're onto something that is maybe the next future gold mine in Nevada. And that's what our goal is, is to be a part of that.
Well, that's pretty interesting. What can you tell me about the team you assembled? You have some interesting people on there. You have Craig Roberts, Paul Matzek, Bassam Moonbarak. Who are these people, and what makes this team different than your competitors?
So the team is really exceptional. I feel humbled to be around them. I'm the youngest member of the team by far. And I'll go through a couple of those guys. So Paul Matisik is a legend in the space. He's sold his last 5 companies in the last 10 years for $2.6 billion, and recognized that the last 10 years has been almost exclusively bear market territory. So he's managed to consistently pick up on things at a cheap price and sell them at a much higher price in a bad market. And he's actually in the process of selling his 6th company right now, called GoldX, for a few $100 million. The only other company that he's focused on, and he's an executive chairman of, is Nevada King. And he, of course, sees the same potential for us to do that here. Bassam Mubarak, is Paul's partner for the last 4 of those 6 deals. So he's been his CFO, and he's our chief financial officer. A very important role in this business is having a great CFO that understands how to put together transactions, whether it be mergers, acquisitions, or selling the company outright. And then Craig Roberts. So Craig is the CEO of Newfound Gold, which I mentioned. Newfound Gold, we took public, the almost exact same team, in August of last year at about $160 million market cap. That company is now trading at about a $1.2 billion market cap. It's been one of the best performers. It's the largest resource-focused company on the Toronto Venture Exchange. And Craig's the CEO there. He's a director at Nevada King. Last person I'll touch on is the final director, whose name is Doug Forrester. And Doug founded a company back in 2014 called New Market. New Market sold for over $1 billion to Kirkland Lake Gold in 2016. Once again, bear market territory, and one of the biggest acquisitions of the bear market. So just have a phenomenal team of people that know how to make money for shareholders. And that's really what it's all about.
Colin, thank you so much for the wealth of information, for the ear on the ground information. I really appreciate the conversation. I thought it was definitely thought-provoking, to say the least, especially in our extreme circumstances that all of us are in right now. So I really thank you for joining us. And if you have any more information, where can people find out more information about you? What else should people know?
Perfect. So for people interested in looking at Nevada King, the website is nevadaking.ca. The ticker symbols, if you want to look at the stocks, if you're looking in Canada, which I know most of your listeners are not, but the ticker symbol there is NKG for Nevada King Gold on the venture. And then the US ticker symbol is VKMTF. And maybe you can put that on the screen because I know those letters are hard ones to sound off. And then if people want to get in touch with me, we have a policy that with any of our companies, anybody who reaches out, we love to hear from you and we'll get back to you within 24 hours or less. So my personal email is Collin, COLLIN, @palisades.ca. And yeah, Luke, thanks so much for having me on. I think commodities are going to really start to shine here through the rest of this year and into the rest of the decade. So I'm excited to see how everything plays out.
Oh, yeah, we're definitely living in very turbulent times, to say the least. Collin, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you so much for the information. If you thought this information was valuable, share it with your friends and family members. It's more important that you guys do that than ever. And because you guys do, we are still here as an independent media organization that is up and running. I love you guys. Stay tuned for more here on WeAreChange.org.